when did you know that you were going to make a career in auto sales?
Well, after one unsuccessful year of college, when it was determined that they didn't want me anymore and I didn't want them anymore, um, I came home and I told mom and dad, I said, I can't, I hate this, and there's got to be another way. So I went to work at this dealership in Sterling. First month, I did not sell a car.
And that's how life started out for today's guest, Roger Beard, who eventually had a very successful life as a car salesman. He's an old friend of mine who shares with us wacky stories about various car sales he's made and delivers great advice on how to make a smart purchase of a vehicle. This is part one of our conversation about deals and wheels.
Okay, Boomer. Okay, Boomer. Okay, Boomer. Okay, Boomer. Okay, Boomer.
Welcome to OK Boomer. This is the second episode in a row now where I've had the treat of speaking with old friends. When I say old friends, they are old. You mean they're old like you, Boomer? Yeah, they're old in fact, they're the same age, okay? Brian Zishi in the last episode, and now Roger Beard in this episode. We're the same age. In fact, we were a trio of wrestlers together at one time and shared lots of memories. In this episode, Roger has agreed to let me pick his mind over 40 years of experience in the automotive industry and sales to ask him all kinds of questions that we as consumers would like to know. And we're also going to talk about how the Beard dealership started in Prophetstown, his experiences with that, and his experiences in the various dealerships that he has worked with, again, over a 40-plus year career. So, Roger, how you doing?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
It's good to hear your voice. It is one that haunts my memories in various ways.
I'm sure the feeling is mutual.
Rogers, here's Jimmy Amadoofus. Welcome to the show. We're glad to have you on it.
Oh, thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate it very much.
I'm looking forward to some good automotive tips because I'm thinking about getting rid of my 71 white van and, turn that in, maybe upgrade. And so whatever tips you got for us as we move through this interview, I'll be all eager to hear.
All right, get your pen out and I'll give you some things to write down.
A pen, man, I got to take note. All right. Well, we're going to get to that, but I want to start with first of all just explaining our relationship. Roger and I, we grew into young men through our life lessons that we learned mainly, I would think, in the sporting arena. Roger and I played football together. We wrestled together. In fact, we were captains of both those two teams our senior year, and we had some track experience also. So we spent a lot of time together, went through a lot of learning and lots of experiences. What are your takeaways from your experiences at Prophetstown High School? Hey, don't be afraid to hold back here, Raj. Here's your chance to spill the beans on this nut job.
Well, I will tell you this, and I've known this man, obviously, like I said, since the fourth grade, and we did do some amazing things together. And I I'll tell you one thing. I think about, especially with wrestling, and we were the very first junior high class to have a wrestling team. When Tom and I and Zeke as well were in the eighth grade. And you could tell it would begin to grow because people had more experience when they came into high school. In our senior year, we were actually the first team in the history of Prophetstown High School to have a winning record in dual meets. And Tom and I were the only seniors. So it was pretty amazing experience. You go through life, and obviously that was 40 plus years ago, 45, 46 years ago, whatever.
Yeah.
But there's, especially when it gets to be this time of the year, as it turns to wrestling, I do think of that.
It is a point of pride, that's for sure. And I forget, as you just pointed out, you would think the first winning team, maybe in the history of the high school, it might be laden with experienced wrestlers. But you and I were the only two. We were
We
the
were the
only
only two seniors there.
That is crazy.
It was you and me.
That is crazy. All right. Well, let's jump into the Beard dealership in Prophetstown. I want to give some history behind that, and then we'll eventually move into some techie questions about the automobile industry as a whole. But tell us about the Beard Pontiac, and the dealership as a whole that started, I understand, in 1959.
Yeah, well, actually, my grandfather owned it prior to that. My grandfather owned three dealerships at one time back in the 50s and 60s, and his main dealership was based out of Peoria. And I was born in Peoria, and I will tell you this story, which is amazingly to me, down here in Florida, I met a couple who actually retired from the Peoria area and will confirm this story, which is funny. But my grandfather back in the early 60s used to sponsor on the local TV channel The Late Show on Saturday nights. And the
Yeah.
commercials would be him having salespeople run cars through, and he would talk about them. They were used cars. And then he would run another one through, and then they go back to the movie. And this went on and on. Well, in 1963, they came up with this little car seat, if you would, and mounted it on the hood of the car. And against my mother's best interest, ran me through there with my dad driving. And I'm sitting in this car at age 3. And he talked about the car and the fact his son was driving. Oh, yeah, by the way, that's my 3-year-old grandson sitting on the hood. So that was my 15 seconds of fame on television.
Oh, that
And
was your introduction to the car business. Wow, how traumatizing. Explains a lot.
and my mother freaked out, and that never ever happened again after that. I promise you that.
The tough way to get on TV, I'll tell you.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And it's so funny that I found someone that remembered it. I couldn't believe it, but they did.
That is funny. So he eventually opened a car dealership in Prophetstown, which is an hour away from Peoria, north of Peoria.
Yeah, it was quite a ways. I'm not sure how he actually got involved in it, other than the dealership he owned in Peoria was the main store was a Pontiac store, so that became available, and he went in there. And then in 1969, he moved my dad up there to take over the store. And that's when we moved to P-Town, and that's November. It was right after, my goodness, it was right after Halloween. In the first week of November, we moved to P-Town. And hence, I met you in Mrs. Thixton's class.
I think I remember you shuffling in that day because, as you already reported, you came after the school year started. You're like, Roger.
Yeah, I did. I'm not in the school picture that you posted online, which I know every other person pretty much. But no, I came late. But yeah, that's the year I came up, and that's the year Dad took over the store.
And I think our reaction was Beard. What kind of a last name is Beard? How about that? Well, it was a name that was highly visible for a number of years in Prophetstown. How many years was that dealership? When did it close down? Was that in the early 80s?
Yeah, Dad closed that store, I want to say in 81 or 82. And it just, things were changing in the car business, and big cars were going out, and gas prices were going up, and
Oh, yeah.
GM and Ford and everybody was downsizing their cars, and it just a rough time. And he just got out, and that worked out for everybody.
Good. But obviously the difficulties you just described were there, but even when those barriers, those challenges weren't there had been a number of difficulties trying to make a car dealership in a small town profitable to make it work.
Oh yeah, there's no question, no question. And their clientele were other small towns around the area. People from Linden and Tampico, and they sold people from Morrison and Fulton and whatnot. But still, it's difficult in a small. It's not like down here where there's 3.5 million people.
Right. So, how many employees did your dad have at any given time?
He had usually 2 salespeople. He had an accountant. He had, I want to say, 4 mechanics and a lot person.
Okay, close to a dozen people then.
Yeah.
Which would be a sizable percentage of the working force in Prophetstown, Illinois, a town of 2,000 for my listeners who aren't familiar with the
exactly,
P-Town.
yes.
Indeed. And I'm sure there's some interesting events or that maybe. Did you work there also? I mean, obviously you probably were free child labor in a number of ways, but were you actually employed and on the
I
payroll?
mean, no, I was never actually an employee. I used to go help him. Um, I would tell you, I remember one time my grandfather came up to visit and didn't let everybody know he was coming.
Mm,
And he showed up, and it was in the summertime. And you know that I worked at the swimming pool next door
yeah.
as a lifeguard, and I taught lessons. And I'd come over to help Dad with something, and I was moving things around. And I was in the shop, and I was probably about 15 years old. And my grandfather looked out the window into the shop, and he asked my dad. He said, "Who's that Indian out there in the shop?" And I had a headband on, and I had white jean shorts and no top and tennis shoes, and I was moving all this stuff. And Dad looked out there and he said, "That's your grandson."
Oh my God. Wahoo McDaniel? What the hell?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I think you remember I had longer hair back
Oh
then, but
yes. Oh
yeah,
yes. That is
I thought it was an Indian.
that is